A new study has come out that looks at the impact on shareholders of changing chief executives. It turns out that whether a chief executive has been ousted or is leaving in a long-planned succession, universally the impact is negative on total shareholder return. With me is Andrew Hill to discuss the study. Andrew, why do you think this is the case?
I think one of the interesting things about this, Brooke, is that actually it shows that even in the case of planned succession, you can see that there are problems created just by the changeover. And I think that's partly to do with the inevitable disruption of a new person in charge. Projects get put on hold, which were the brainchild of the previous CEO, those kinds of issues. There's also, I think, the issue that if you are in a planned succession, the successor may not be able to take radical action because there's nothing obviously going wrong with the company. So possibly some things that need to be done don't get done. We're aware, of course, if there is disruption that's going on and a successor is needed urgently, perhaps appointed from outside, that there's inevitable impact on the share price. But I think what's really interesting is that even the planned succession, the things that we advise people to do, have an impact, a negative impact.
And it's interesting actually because the study found that planned successions are by far more common. Last year, all but 14% of successions were planned. I was thinking about, when you think about examples of this, Tesco comes to mind because obviously from Terry Leahy to Phil Clark was a planned succession. Do you think that's an example of what you're talking about?
Well, I think the interesting thing about that one is that actually Terry Leahy was felt latterly to have overstayed his welcome. Okay, he went out on a high, but when people looked back and saw what Phil Clark had inherited, particularly in UK retail, there was evidence that possibly things should have been done sooner. Then, of course, you had the follow-up to that, which was then Phil Clark being taken out more abruptly, which also had a negative effect. Because in the end there were things that had been unearthed that needed to be explained to the stock market afterwards. So arguably it has both ends. You have to change a shareholder, you have to change a chief executive at a certain point. You can't let them run on forever. So there's going to be negative impact at some point. This is the evidence of this study at least.
When you think of the other management literature about whether we should have insiders and outsiders, do you think this adds to that? I think we've often heard that it's better to bring in an outsider when things have been bad. I wonder whether this suggests that you should also consider an outsider when things have been good, because they tend to go inside and it hasn't worked so well.
Yeah, I think the orthodoxy is that you bring in an outsider when there is trouble, and that when there isn't trouble, promoting somebody internally minimises the amount of upset. But you're right, I think there is actually the possibility here that you could say, well, actually, to bring somebody in who has a fresh pair of eyes may be useful, given we're going to get some short-term share price effect, total shareholder return reduction over the year after the changeover, whatever happens. Let's have somebody who can bring something fresh to it.
Certainly makes me wish that Strategy N would look at the role of insiders and outsiders as well as planned and forced successions. Well, maybe we'll ask them to do that next year.